Thank you. Thanks for the great introduction. Thanks for having me here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. I see the morning coffee kicked in. So I hope it will last you for another hour. Thanks again for the great introduction and nice outline of what I'm going to talk about today. I probably don't really have to spend too much time convincing this audience that we are leaving an enormous amount of digital footprints behind when using digital products and services, such as your smartphones. Now, a smartphone would be a dream of a psychologist 20 or 30 years ago. Imagine, if psychologists at that time heard that there's going to be this device that virtually every single person in the world is going to be carrying around at all times, device that can record their entire communication, device that can record their geographical location, device that has an accelerometer built in, which essentially means that if you keep it in your pocket, this device can feel how quickly you're standing up or how quickly you're sitting down and how quickly you are walking. Now, that's a great proxy for how anxious or nervous or how tired you are. Device that can detect changes in the tone of your voice and is listening to you at all times. Okay, Google. Now, how many of your phones just vibrated now? Right? So they're probably not really, not probably, for sure, it's not the case that everything you say at home where Alexa is around or everything you say around your phone is automatically uploaded to the cloud, but samples of what you're saying. And those samples include not only what you're saying, but also how you're saying it, whether you are nervous and speaking very quickly or maybe you're calm and speaking softly. Those samples are being recorded and are being added to your file somewhere there in the cloud. Now, even if you don't have a smartphone, and this would be a pretty difficult existence these days to survive without one, you probably have a credit card. Now, that's yet another digital device that tracks not only where you go, but also what you are buying and how much you are spending and whether you pay back your loans on time. Your car, if it's a new car, it's probably recording how you're driving, where you're driving, what you're listening to, and uploading it to the cloud. And now we're just scratching the surface of the devices that are surrounding us and that we are using every single day. Back in 2012, IBM estimated that in this way, by using digital products and devices, we are generating, each one of us, 500 megabytes of data every single day. And this is back in 2012, a very long time in the digital age. Now, to help you imagine how much data that is, let's have the following thought experiment. Let's imagine that you wanted to back up just 1 day worth of data that humanity used to produce back in 2012. On letter-sized paper, let's print it out so a magnetic storm doesn't wipe it out. A letter-sized paper, double-sided, single line, Times New Roman, size 12. How tall is going to be a stack of paper that contains just 1 day worth of data that humanity used to produce back in 2012? Any guesses? Pardon?
Eiffel Tower.
Great guess, thank you. More than that. I know that he knows, actually, so that's a... any? Great, more than that. Pardon? More than that. To the moon, now we're the right scale of things. To the moon, more than that. To the sun and back 4 times over. And this is just 1 day worth of data that we used to produce back in 2012. Fast forward to 2025, this is not such a long way from now. And recently, The Economist estimated that an average human being will be generating 62 gigabytes of data every single day. And we're going to have more people by 2025. We cannot back it up on paper. We all used it for our 2012 backup. Let's back it up on DVDs. 5 gigabytes per disk. How tall will be a stack of DVDs just for 1 day worth of data? 105,000 kilometers. That's the stack of DVDs that will be necessary to back up 1 day worth of data in 2025. Which brings me to the next slide. Does anyone know what that is? Pardon? Wow! Snowmobile. The snowmobile. That's great. That's amazing. It never happened to me. Like, I just have, audiences of hundreds of people and no one ever knows what it is. That's great. Well done. Seriously. But also it's a truck. That would be the most, I'm surprised that no one here was like, what the hell is that? That's very un-American of you, not recognizing a truck. I must say that in Europe, this is what I expect in Europe. In Europe, no one knows what that is. Everyone's just sheepishly looking at this slide. But in the US, at least, before I ask the question, at least some people in the audience will be like, oh, look at this amazing truck. But it's the first time that actually ever anyone recognized that this is Amazon's response to a portable hard drive. Actually, you can load, if I remember correctly, 4 days worth of data that we used to produce back in 2012 on this single truck. It just would take 10 days to load it up. So now, if your organization plans to join or is joining Amazon Cloud, they will send over this truck to upload your data, essentially. Now, the question is, why would Amazon carry data on a truck if you can just send it over the internet? Speed, great, amazing. Our ability to produce data and our hunger for data is growing faster than our ability to send it over the large distances, which essentially means that shipping data on a truck is faster than sending it over the internet. By the way, it's just a completely new industry there. Imagine ships sailing from America probably to somewhere nice and sunny to data centers where you can use sun to power the computers, essentially carrying data in containers like that. Okay, great. So it's faster. What is the other reason? Safer, thank you. If you think, both as an organization, as an individual, that no one is listening when you're using internet, well, you're either wrong or bloody boring, and no one cares. But you are not boring, because at the least, you guys are great consumers. So there's a very broad range of organizations and institutions that can benefit a lot by listening to the data streams that you are sending over the internet. And this is because, as many people would argue today, data is our new oil. It's our new most valuable resource. And I'm sure you can think of many examples of companies that were explicitly started around the idea of either generating data or harvesting data, such as Google or Facebook, right? You don't pay for these services. Well, why are you not paying for these services? Exactly, because you're not the customers, you're the products. You are essentially being farmed in a good way. I love Facebook and Google. I'm just a big fan of both technologies, but I'm also aware that I'm not a customer. I'm essentially living on a farm and generating data that is providing those companies with value. So there's a broad range of companies that were explicitly started around this idea, but increasingly you see entire industries pivoting away from their original business focus into the business of data generating or harvesting. Now, one example, credit cards. Who here in this room has a credit card? Hands up. Nice. Now, who here in this room ends up paying for the credit card at the end of the year? After, all of the cashbacks and benefits, who here actually has to pay for this piece of plastic? Hands up. Guys, you really need to do some more research online, seriously. Banks are gladly going to pay you 2%, up to 2% of what you're spending for the privilege of you using the card. Why? Because credit card is no longer a product. You guys are the product. Credit card companies have understood quite some time ago that financial services is a great business, but generating data, consumer data, data about how much you are spending, where you are spending, whether your credit score is good or not, is much more valuable than just sticking to the business of finance services. Now, the same relates to even less obvious industries like Tesla. I'm sure that many people here heard Tesla managers saying, we're not really a car producer. We're a data company. We're a software company. Now, and this is absolutely not surprising because this data that you are generating when using their product is extremely useful. Now, can you think of an application of the data that is generated by you driving Teslas around? Who here has a Tesla? Hands up. Don't want to admit to, it was very, in some circles, very unpatriotic. You just don't burn any oil. That's, what sense does that make? Okay, so you don't really have personal experience with driving Teslas. I'm sorry, okay. But imagine you had one. So you're driving around with your Tesla. Everything you do is recorded. There are cameras all around. There's also a self-driving kind of drive assist system built in. What benefit does Tesla have from recording everything you're doing? Great. Thank you, sir. Amazing. Look. And let me actually start with another case study here. Google, the original data company. They had an idea quite a few years ago. Let's build a self-driving car. Not sure if you've seen one of their prototypes. First of all, they look like no one really wants to ever drive them. They're just these little tiny, cute little cars, but like it's not a car that you want to, drive the kids to school in or pick up your girlfriend in. It just looks a bit lame. And then what they did, they hired a lot of engineers, paid them a lot of money, put them in those prototypes, and asked them to drive around the parking lot. This is how they're generating data that is supposed to help their AI to learn how to drive the car. Now, Tesla used a very different approach. Tesla built a nice, fancy product that people are willing to pay a lot of money for, and then rolled out the drive assist system, which is essentially AI trying to drive your car, but you still have to keep your hands on the steering wheel and correct it whenever it makes a mistake. Now, guess what you're doing? You're teaching AI how to drive car well. Now, this is extremely valuable because, as I'm sure you realize, self-driving cars are similar to other snowball type of businesses, like Google. Once a company produces a nice, reliable, self-driving car that can drive around on its own, many people would buy it, and the more people buy it, the better the car gets at driving, and more of these cars that can communicate with each other are on the road, which means that they gain a competitive advantage over other companies trying to produce a self-driving car. And you have another Google, another Microsoft, another Facebook, just this time on the road. And there's a genius idea to even charge you now for the privilege of helping Tesla to achieve world dominance. Great. Oh, and by the way, apart from self-driving cars, a recent estimate on the value of the data generated by the cars, like where you are and how fast you're driving and where the traffic is 7.5 trillion in the year 2025. So put aside self-driving cars. That's a great business there. Okay, so the big question is, what can be gleaned from our digital footprints? I mentioned already our digital footprints that we leave behind while driving our car can be used to teach AI how to drive a car. Observing the stock markets can be used to predict the future movements of the prices there. You can clearly see the benefit of doing that. Your health data, your 23andMe, your genetic data can be used to improve medicines, improve our diagnostic tools, prolong our lives, make our lives happier and longer. People are clearly going to be paying for that, and they already do. Now, I'm a psychologist, so I focus on using digital footprints to try to understand humans a bit better, try to understand our psychological traits and predict our future behavior. Now, in one of my first studies, I wanted to see whether those digital footprints that we're leaving behind, are they even relevant to our psychological traits? Can we predict people's psychological traits from the digital footprints that they leave behind? And now, it seems pretty obvious, it sounds pretty obvious to everyone, but it wasn't so some years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago. There was this idea then that when people go online, they somehow change. That, you know, a 40-year-old man suddenly becomes a 16-year-old woman or a unicorn or something else. That essentially somehow we are not ourselves while using digital products and devices. And there was this big question, actually. Can we then somehow link people's real lives with their online personas? Is this essentially the same person in those two environments? And now the answer to this question is really crucial. Because if you are different people online and offline, it means that whatever you're doing offline cannot be really used to optimize your experience or sell you something or manipulate you or help you in the offline world. So in this study, what we did, we looked at people's Facebook likes. We got 60,000 people, we got their Facebook likes, and we also had them fill in a personality questionnaire and a bunch of other psychological questionnaires. We wanted to see whether those traditional, well-established psychological constructs, those intimate traits such as IQ and personality, can be predicted from people's digital footprints. And let me show you a short video that summarizes the results.
Now, clicking like on Facebook is something most of us do without thinking.
The University of Cambridge over in London actually did a study
of what people like on Facebook to try to determine facts about them that they wouldn't otherwise know. So they didn't just look at the products, the movies, the bands that people liked. They also looked at the status updates that people liked, the photos that people liked, and they were able to draw some really, really interesting conclusions about
all of your likes that you're clicking can tell more about you than you might have realized, from your political values to your religion to your gender to your happiness to your age.
In fact, some parts of your identity can be predicted with 95% accuracy.
Accuracy was lowest, about 60%, when it came to predicting whether a user's parents were still together when they were 21. People whose parents divorced before they were 21 tended to like statements about relationships. Drug users were ID'd with about 65% accuracy, smokers with 73%, and drinkers with 70%. Sexual orientation was also easier to distinguish among men, 88% right there. For women, it was about 75%. Gender, by the way, race, religion, and political views were predicted with high accuracy as well. For instance, white versus black, 95%.
The findings have alarmed privacy campaigners who fear this research could be used to commercially exploit users.
So keep in mind that just because you think you're not revealing a lot of personal details on Facebook, you're still spreading the word to the outside world as well as those online marketers.
Volunteers with few friends liked walking with your friend and randomly pushing them into someone or something. Hey, it's not their fault they don't have friends. Everyone they know keeps getting randomly pushed into traffic. High IQ corresponds to liking Mozart, science, and the Colbert Report.
Research indicated people who like Harley-Davidson motorbikes are generally of low IQ. We thought we'd better offer a right to reply.
I'd say our average customer is probably more intelligent than most, and we've certainly got a lot of customers who are, well, people from Cambridge University for a start.
A like on Facebook can reveal if you're a gay man. Yeah, especially if what you choose to like is penises. It's apparently true. That's my wife walking in. I'm like, oh! It's a joke.
Okay. By the way, don't be an idiot and think that if somebody clicked on Wicked the Musical that they're gay automatically, or they clicked on Harley Davidson and they're stupid automatically. Ironically, that would make you stupid.
So as you guys can see, those seemingly innocent digital footprints, Facebook likes, and no one really likes penises on Facebook. There's no intimate likes there. It's a picture of your cousin, or maybe a quote, or your favorite restaurant, or a movie that you like. Those are not intimate digital footprints. Those are not, this is not the history of your geographical locations, or your online dating profiles, or the messages that you exchange, your personal emails or instant messages. Those are publicly available Facebook likes, censored by both your friends and Facebook itself. And yet, you can use those seemingly innocent types of digital footprints to make an extremely broad range of accurate predictions, revealing your psychological traits, intimate traits, demographic traits. And this is because the sheer fact that you liked Harley Davidson on Facebook is just the tip of an iceberg. Because what happens is that then you can apply machine learning, AI, or just simple stats, statistical technologies, to this data that is visible on the surface and extract much more secondary data. You can extract predictions about your personality, IQ, sexual orientation, political views, religious views, and so on. So the question now is, how does it work? And I have this short equation here that we'll go through so you can understand it better. But before we go there, let's just work with one practical example. Imagine there's this anonymous Facebook user. You know nothing about them, apart from the fact that they liked Hello Kitty, the brand. Now, what is the age and gender of this anonymous person? Female, young, old? Yes, young, female. Now, so judgmental. In fact, this retired Japanese gentleman has the largest collection of Hello Kitty toys. But in general, you're right. What you can see here, and this is no, there's no computer science here, it's just Facebook audience insights, where you can check what is the profile of people who like a particular thing, just publicly available tool. You can see here that while 54% of all Facebook users are women, 99% of people who liked Hello Kitty are women. Which essentially means that if you knew nothing about this anonymous person and you guessed they're female, you would be very likely to be correct. Now, do they work in sales or in the military? Sales, of course. Do they use a PC or an iPhone? Great, of course, a self-respecting Hello Kitty fan wouldn't even know what a PC stands for, right? Great, so as you guys can see, a single digital footprint is enough. And you don't need to be a computer scientist or a data scientist or an algorithm or AI. Just single digital footprint is enough to reveal to us a very broad range of psychodemographic traits, likely psychodemographic traits of a particular person. Now, in reality, this task is much more difficult. If I started with this Facebook like, the Forrest Gump, the movie, and I asked you, what is the gender of this person? Well, this task will be much more difficult simply because everyone likes Forrest Gump. That's just amazing. It's an amazing film. But if you look a bit more closely, you can see that men are slightly overrepresented among people who liked Forrest Gump, the movie. Which means that, well, you should update. Knowing that this anonymous person liked Forrest Gump, the movie, you should update your beliefs about what the gender are, but you're still going to be wrong pretty often if you just guess they're a male. To be precise, you'll be wrong 48% of the time. But there's some information in it. And now, if you're an algorithm, you can add up those little crumbs of data, crumbs of signal from tens or hundreds or thousands of digital footprints to arrive at a very accurate prediction of people's gender, psychological traits, political views, and what they're going to buy next. Okay, so the question now is, how accurate are such predictive models? Now, when I first tried to answer this question, I thought, hey, let's just take gender or age or political views and see how accurate those models are. Now, the problem is that things like gender and age, those models are nearly perfectly accurate. The accuracies are in high 90s, which essentially means that maybe those few percent of the times when the model gets it wrong, it might be that actually we just have incorrect ground truth, that maybe a person lied to us on a questionnaire about their age or gender. But this is also not very impressive to people. People say, well, I can also judge others' gender and age. This is not just such a big deal. You know, I see someone and I can make those judgments pretty accurately. So I'm not impressed by a computer being able to do the same thing. So what we thought we'll do is that we'll pick up something more complicated, something that humans cannot really predict so well. So we thought of personality. Many of you, I'm sure, have had a chance to take a personality questionnaire. They're very broadly used in career planning and recruitment. And they're used to find a good match between people and jobs. They're used in clinical psychology to try to judge what are your risks to your psychological well-being. Those questionnaires can be extremely long. Many of the questionnaires that I use in my research are up to 300 questions long and take an hour to fill in. Now, it's easy to convince someone to fill in such a questionnaire when they are seeking help or looking for a job. It's extremely difficult to convince your students to spend an hour working on a questionnaire like that. Also, it's extremely difficult to convince people to respond to those questionnaires honestly. If you're looking for a job, a personality questionnaire is not really a personality test anymore. It's just an IQ test. Because you know, if you're smart, what are the requirements of the position, and you would just answer these questions in such a way as to appear like to be a perfect candidate. So what you're actually testing is IQ and the willingness to misrepresent yourself in the process. So those are real problems faced by people administering personality tests, and there's a whole science called psychometrics trying to build those questionnaires in such a way as to avoid, minimize the amount of cheating and misrepresentation that affect the accuracy of the scores. We are also good at judging others' personality, but definitely not as good as when judging other people's gender or age. So if you know someone, you can actually define knowing someone as being able to predict whether they like art, whether they are attending meetings on time, whether they're well organized, whether they're anxious and emotional or emotionally stable. So now we thought that we'll see whether computers can do the same. So what you can see here is a plot. I'm sorry, I will have a few plots here, but not too many, that shows you how accurately we can predict scores on a big 5 personality questionnaire from people's Facebook likes. And what you can see here is the more likes you reveal to an algorithm, the more accurate the prediction is. Now, if I had any occupational psychologists in the room, I would get a wow here because it's extremely accurate. Now, let me illustrate the accuracy in a slightly different way. So as I mentioned to you before, people can also judge others' personality. So what we did, we said, okay, let's compare the accuracy of an algorithm with an accuracy of people's friends and family members and their coworkers. So we had used both algorithms to fill in personality questionnaire in the name of our participants, and we had their friends and family members to fill in the questionnaire in their name. And then we checked how accurate those both approaches were. So now the question to you guys. How many likes do you have to reveal to an algorithm for an algorithm to be as accurate at judging your personality as your work colleagues? 12. That might be the correct answer. I actually forgot. It sounds like it. Yes, 12. I remember it's at 10, but quite likely it was 12. Wonderful. OK, you're banned from responding to any further questions. OK. Friends and family members. And I'll just give you an answer because clearly there's some knowledge there in the room. 100 to 150 likes were necessary for an algorithm to be more accurate than your friends and family members. Now, the most accurate of human judges, your spouses, were outperformed by an algorithm that could look at 250 of your random Facebook likes. Now, think about this. This is really upsetting to anyone who has a spouse or is a spouse. Both. I guess you have to be both. You spend a lot of time with this person. They have seen you across many different contexts. They have seen you angry and sad and euphoric. You had intimate conversations with them. If you got married recently, they still pay a lot of attention to you. And yet, a simple equation, looking at the likes of the pictures of the funny goats that you made on Facebook, and the restaurants that you liked or movies that you watched, the simple equation is able to anticipate your responses to questions such as, I like poetry, or I'm a very friendly person, or I'm an emotional person, with higher accuracy than your own spouse. Great. So what types of data can be used to reveal your intimate traits? I mentioned to you Facebook likes, but it's just scratching the surface. Facebook likes are one of the lamest types of digital footprints. Why? Because they happen in the public. You do not like things that you would Google. You do not even remember what you're Googling because you want to forget some of those search queries. But no worries, Google will remember those things for you. You don't like things that you would write about when you send messages to people, or things that you talk about with your friends and family members when Alexa is sitting in the room and listening to it. Why? Because you're acutely aware that everything you like on Facebook is immediately seen by your friends. And somehow, you're more concerned about what your friends are going to see than what Google and Amazon can see. Isn't this weird that we just can give Amazon and Google our most intimate data that we'll never share with our friends? And we're all kind of cool about this. Great. History of geographical locations, your GPS coordinate logs, essentially. Think about this for a second. Just by knowing the history of your GPS locations, I know what time you wake up. I know what time you come home in the evening. I know what time you go to bed. I know how many kilometers you travel during the day. I know whether you're cycling or you are driving a car. This is already an awful lot of information about a person. Now, add to it some metadata. Look, you can overlay the history of geographical locations on the map. And what you can see here is just 1 day worth of my life. Now, if you now married the history of GPS locations with a map, now suddenly you get a ton of additional insights. You know where I live, so you know what is the value of my house. You know how much money I owe to my bank. You know where I work, so you know what my profession is. You know how much I earn. You know that I'm drinking beer. You can't do anything else at Antonio's nut house. You can also eat some nuts. Yes, it's very bad for allergic people because its nuts are literally everywhere. Great. You know how much I spend on food. You know to which restaurant I went. So again, you have information about how affluent I am. You have information about what I like eating. You know that I cycle to work because you can look at how quickly I'm moving through the geographical space. So maybe I take a bus. Now add additional layer of metadata to it. Add the history of GPS locations of other people. And now suddenly, you know who my friends are and who my coworkers are. You know with whom I hang out at work. You know with whom I went to the nut house. You know whom I took to Zola at the restaurant. So you have my social network. Now, if you know anything about psychology, having my social network allows you to dig even deeper into my intimate traits. We know that there's a phenomenon called homophily, which essentially means that we tend to hang out, birds of feather flock together. We just tend to hang out with others that are similar to us. So if you just know political views of few of the people in my network, now you know my political views. You know their religion, you know my religion, you know my sexual orientation. You know my personality. Extroverts tend to hang out with other extroverts. Conservative people, traditional people tend to hang out with other traditional people, and so on. Playlists, everything you say at home, your messages, and those types of signal are not just used in psychological labs. You have well-established companies such as IBM that have public API that anyone can use to upload a sample of their own text or a text of their customer or a neighbor and get a detailed personality profile back. Now another range of technologies, CCTV cameras. Some people say, okay, look, it's very sad that all of these other people leave digital footprints behind. I, on the other hand, I don't have Facebook. Well, actually, I'm just hypothetically speaking because I do have Facebook and love those technologies. But imagine this person saying, well, I have no Facebook, I have no LinkedIn, I'm not using email, I have my assistant, print them out for me, and I have no smartphone, I don't drive a Tesla. I'm leaving 0 digital footprints. Well, of course you are not leaving 0 digital footprints. First of all, other people leave digital footprints, and you are included in those digital footprints. John said that, you can write in an email. Or you can have their number in your phone book. Or you can upload their picture to Facebook, and now facial recognition technology will match them with other picture of the same person, and suddenly this profile is, your file is again created and being stored up there. Also, this would be an extremely difficult life that only the wealthiest and the most privileged people can pull off. If you're a wealthy CEO and you have a bunch of assistants, you can have people write and print emails for you. If you are a single mother working 2 jobs and need to really quickly get from one to another, you cannot afford not having a smartphone, not having a credit card, not having an online presence, and leave digital footprints behind. So essentially, for most of us, there's absolutely no option of escaping this digital environment. But imagine there was someone who was in the coma for the last 30 years. Who just woke up today and said, hey, I'm just this one person that left absolutely no digital footprint behind. So they can walk around, the cameras would see them, they would try to look them up online, the systems that are used to track customers, for example, around shopping malls. Not sure if you guys know, CCTV cameras now in shopping malls are used to track you as you walk between the stores, which is great for optimizing how the shopping malls work. And they also are using facial recognition technology to essentially see how often you are coming back, how much money you are spending, whether you're smiling when you're leaving a particular shop or not, and how big your bags are. And what I'm talking about, those are extremely simple. This is AI 101 computer vision technology. But imagine, there's absolutely nothing on you up there on the internet. Guess what? Just by looking at your face, without even looking you up online, a computer algorithm can already tell an awful lot about you. And when I say that, people say, hey, wait, are you suggesting here that my face is revealing stuff about my character? This sounds like pseudoscience. This can't be true. Well, wait a second. We are all doing it all the time. Gender. is an intimate psychodemographic trait, people have no trouble recognizing gender of others just by looking at their face. Emotion is an intimate psychological state, yet we have no trouble judging emotion just by looking at someone's face, even when they try to hide it. Genes are pretty personal, right? And yet we have no trouble judging genetic similarity just by looking at people's face. The same about genetic disorders. Developmental disorders that can be detected from people's faces by a trained physician or a trained algorithm. Health. Political views. Which one of these guys voted for Trump? Right? We are able to make a very broad range of accurate psychodemographic predictions just by looking at other people's faces. Now, having said that, there are some traits that we are not really great at judging from people's faces, like personality. We can judge other people's personality from personal interactions with them. We cannot judge personality that easily just by looking at someone's face. So when you look at those two pictures here, those are two psychologists. One of them is an extrovert and another one is an introvert. Who thinks that Sandra, the one on your right, is an introvert? Hands up. Okay, who thinks that Sandrine on your left is an introvert? Hands up. So there was well, actually you're right. There was more votes for Sandrine. Sandrine is an introverted one. And on average, people are correct in 54% of cases, right? A toss of a coin will be 50%. People can judge, distinguish between introverts and extroverts with slightly above chance likelihood. Now, this means there's some tiny little bit of information that is available to us. So now the fact that we cannot judge personality from people's faces very accurately can mean two things. Either our faces essentially do not contain that much information about our personality, or personality is as clearly displayed on your face as gender. It's just that human brain did not evolve a capability to either detect the signal or interpret the signal. And let me prove to you that it's the latter. What you can see here is 10 introverted females and 10 extroverted females, and the pictures are just overlaid on top of each other. No one here in the room would have trouble guessing which of these groups are introverted and which one are extroverted, right? Look, extroverts are smiling. They clearly have more makeup, a slightly more fashionable hairstyle, and more likely to dye their hair. Introverts tend to wear glasses. Extroverts, when you look at the colorful version of those images, you can actually see that extroverts just tend to have always blue or green eyes. Now, so there's either some interesting genetic component to extroversion that predisposes you to have green or blue eyes, or extroverts just wear green or blue contact lenses because they don't wear glasses that often, right? You can see less likely to dye their hair, less fashionable hairstyle. When you look at the larger picture, you can also see that extroverts wear slightly more revealing clothes. Now, when you look at the images taken in the lab, we're taking now images of people in the lab, you can also see there are slight differences in facial features such as the shape of the jaw or shape of the eyebrows. Now, those are not Hello Kitties. The fact that you're wearing glasses does not automatically mean that you're an introvert. Those are Forrest Gumps. The fact that you're wearing glasses means that you have slightly higher probability of being an introvert. And now a computer algorithm can very easily add up those little crumbs of information that are spread all over your place and make an accurate prediction. Make a prediction just based on a pair of faces. A computer algorithm can distinguish between introverts and extroverts with the same accuracy as their work colleagues can after having known them for a few years and worked with them every single day. Just one pair of faces. Now a question to you guys. One interesting difference between introverts and extroverts is that extroverts seem to have no nostrils. Any guesses why this could be the case? Great, thank you, guys. If you are to remember just one thing from this talk, extroverts know how to take selfies. And if you want to take a good selfie, you want to do it like that. Great. And again, this is not just what's happening in the computer science and psychology labs. They are B2B products, such as Microsoft Cognitive Services or Face++, where you can upload a picture, again, of yourself, or maybe of your customer, or maybe your neighbor. And this algorithm that is publicly available there for free will give you a range of psychodemographic predictions about the face that you have just uploaded. Which brings me to the next question. So what? And if you have not been in the coma for the last 30 years, you very well realize what's going on. Those technologies were deployed at scale have a potential to change the outcomes of the elections, to have countries leave European Union, to have huge groups of people and their opinions swayed. And I'm actually not saying that it's all bad. I'm super happy to talk more about it in the Q&A session. So you've all heard about Cambridge Analytica and how they used Facebook digital footprints to create psychological profiles of over 200 million Americans and then use it to target political communication at them. They started working with Ted Cruz first. They also worked for Brexit. They actually also worked for defense industry, both in America and in Europe. Essentially, they worked for NATO to do the same thing that they did here in America in other countries, such as Afghanistan, for example. And the scandal was so big that they even flew Mark all over to the other coast, and he had to explain to the senators about what's going on. And I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to watch this testimony. It's curious in many different ways. It's curious how little the senators knew about how the technology works. So by the way, those are the people that are going to be working on policies that are there to protect your data. But also there's another curious thing, which is Mark was so surprised that anyone could use digital footprints and predict some psychological traits from those things. How is that even possible? Completely forgetting that the very technology that Cambridge Analytica used in 2016 has been patented by Facebook itself back in 2012. Determining user personality characteristics from social networking system communication and characteristics. And of course, by the way, this is what the newsfeed technology is based on. The fact that when you open Facebook, you have those engaging and a bit addictive stream, of content and ads and stories from your friends, those stories are not picked at random. There's an AI algorithm that is studying you, trying to extract your psychological profile, and then pick stories that are going to be most engaging for you. Which brings me to the subject of this talk. That's my title slide. I'm glad we are done with the introduction here. The end of privacy. We're leaving an increasing amount of digital footprints behind when using digital products and services. And algorithms are getting better at turning those digital footprints into accurate predictions of our intimate traits. Which essentially means that even today, a motivated third party, and it doesn't have to be Cambridge Analytica, it can be your neighbor, can look at your digital footprints and extract virtually any intimate psychological traits, make a very accurate prediction. And when I say that, people react immediately, okay, that's really serious. Let's talk about regulation. Let's talk about how governments can give us back control over our data. And I'm absolutely not against that. In fact, I worked with policymakers, not only in the United States, but also in other countries, trying to help them understand the risks, the privacy risks, and help them to shape good policies that are going to help us to protect people's data. But please don't forget that even governments cannot protect their data from a motivated third party. So what makes you believe that somehow us citizens will have enough assets, education, time, technological prowess to be able to pull that off? Not to mention that if you somehow magically, and I just don't believe this is possible, and the longer I study this subject, the less I believe this is possible, that if somehow magically you gave people full control over their data, this would mean that many of the technologies that we have now would stop working. Google Maps explicitly relies on us sharing our geographical location with the platform at all times. And you may say, well, who cares? Let's kill Google Maps then. No, that's not that easy. Google Maps is one of the greenest technologies of recent years. It saves a lot of fuel on a national level. It helps people, it saves a lot of time. Increases the time people can spend working or with their families. It saves lives. The same data that is used to help you navigate to work or home is used by emergency services to reach the victims of accidents in the shortest possible time. So now, giving people control over their data, and the rational thing to do is to say, well, I don't want my data to be shared with Google Maps, is going to kill technologies like that. To which people say, hey, maybe then let's pay people for the data. It's a great idea, apart from the fact that it's already happening. You're being paid for your data with this amazing free service of Google Maps, of Facebook, and so on. And also, if you know anything about the markets, you would know that paying people for data cannot work. And if it would work, it will already be happening. And it cannot work because it's really easy to fake data. So if suddenly someone decides, okay, Google decides we're going to pay people for the data, then my students, instead of reading books, they would start creating bots that are going to generate fake data. And the more fake data you have on the market, the less the value, the lower the value of the data. So the more fake data you need to produce, which results in the market collapse. And if you're being paid for your data, you will also do the same equivalent of that on a small scale. You would just put your Fitbit on your dog and have it run around. Because why would you share your data if you can be paid for your dog's data? Right? Not to mention that if some of us will be able to opt out from the system and essentially pay to retain our privacy, it takes us back to a class-based society, where some of us can buy out of the privacy risks, just pay for it, and have all of those other poor schmucks to have their privacy, to give up their privacy for our benefit so we can drive to work happily using Google Maps. This is just not the system that seems fair or actually feasible to me. Not to mention that even if you're given control of your data, you're still Homo sapiens. And Homo sapiens is one of the most narcissistic species out there. You want to share your tweets. You want to tell the world about how amazing you are and show them a picture of your new baby cousin. And this is already enough data to let the algorithm to make pretty accurate predictions. Not to mention that no one is going to now suddenly start walking the streets with their face covered to prevent facial recognition algorithms from working. Which brings me to this slide. People would say, hey, okay, this seems like an intractable problem, so what? So what? Maybe we just have some creepy marketing then. Maybe we just leave with Cambridge Analytica's of the future. Who cares? In fact, people in an experiment where people are given a chance to have their data fully protected while using Facebook, they're willing to pay 60 cents a year for the privacy. So everyone talks about how important it is, but then when they actually have to pay for it, they value it at 60 cents a year. But losing our privacy is not just some creepy marketing. Losing our privacy is much more dangerous and serious than that. And this is, I think, well illustrated by this example here. What you can see here is 2 groups of 100 men, and their images were averaged, and you can see they're clearly different. Now, those men do not differ in terms of age or political views or a bunch of other basic psychodemographic traits, but there's one important psychodemographic difference between them. Can anyone guess what it is? And gentleman there is banned from guessing. Great. Well, great. I've never thought about this. You're right. But it will be funny actually in the context of what I'm going to show you now. But also, this is 100 gay men and 100 straight men. Based on just one pair of images, and humans, again, it's like personality. Humans can't do this. We cannot really, a gaydar for humans doesn't work. But based on just a pair of images, the computer algorithm can distinguish between gay and straight men with above 80% accuracy. And if you add a few more images, 5 images, allow computers to distinguish between gay and straight men with over 90% accuracy. Which, will you combine it with this map, which shows you where you're going to be killed by the government if you are homosexual, makes a point that losing our privacy is not just some creepy marketing, but it's a matter of life and death for many. And it's not just faces. Facebook likes, your status updates, your playlist, your history of geographical locations are even more revealing about your intimate traits, including sexual orientation. And it's not just sexual orientation. Saudi Arabian government will happily kill you if you are an atheist, not only if you are gay. Think about your political views being exposed in many different countries and many different places, including in the United States. It's all good to be gay in San Francisco, but if you're publicly gay in some places in the United States, it's not going to end up very well for you as well. Which brings me to this one last slide. Look, we can all agree that privacy is a great thing to have. And we can all agree that we should guarantee people their privacy. But privacy is a bit like tornadoes here. We can all agree that tornadoes should be illegal. And yet delegalizing tornadoes will not stop them from coming. Now, delegalizing people invading your privacy is not going to guarantee that you can have your privacy back. You can potentially regulate Facebook and Google. You cannot regulate intelligence services of other countries. You cannot regulate that easily startups that have nothing to lose and want to just build something quickly and break things. Which essentially means that the sooner we realize that our privacy is gone, whatever politicians and policymakers do, and the sooner we realize that now we have to start thinking about how to organize our post-privacy world in such a way as to make it still a pleasant and nice and habitable place to live, the better for all of us. And I would hope that essentially this presentation is going to help us to move towards this discussion. Thank you very much.